Welcome back to Reformed Thinking. It is good to have you with us.
Good to be here.
I want to start today by asking you to construct a mental image.
Okay.
I want you to picture the absolute best version of yourself. Imagine you have finally done it. You've conquered your greed. You've conquered your fear.
That's a tall order already.
It is, but stay with me. You're standing before a crowd, and you're not just writing a modest check for charity. You are liquidating everything.
Everything.
The house, the car, the retirement fund, the stocks. You're handing it all over to feed the hungry. You are standing there with empty pockets and, a full heart.
That is a powerful image. It's the kind of thing that would get you on the cover of magazines. You'd be the saint of the century.
That's the picture. And let's take it a step further.
Go on.
Imagine you're not just generous, but you're brave. You're standing tied to a stake, the wood is piled around you, and you are about to be burned alive because you refuse to denounce your faith.
The ultimate sacrifice.
You're making the ultimate sacrifice.
The martyr's death. I mean, historically, the church has viewed that as the highest honor a Christian can receive.
Right. Now, here's the question. Is it possible to do all of that, to be the philanthropist and the martyr and have God look at you and say, this means absolutely nothing to me?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a terrifying question.
Yeah.
Most of us operate on the assumption that the action proves the faith. If I do the big thing, surely the big faith is there.
Surely. How could it not be? But today, we're looking at a text that says, no. Not necessarily. We're doing a deep dive into what might be the scariest verse in the New Testament. We are looking at 1 Corinthians 13.3, and we're doing it through the lens of Jonathan Edwards.
And Edwards is the perfect guide for this.
Yeah.
We often think of him as the fire and brimstone preacher because of sinners in the hands of an angry God. But Edwards was he was a surgeon of the soul.
That's a great way to put it.
He was obsessed with motives.
Yeah.
He wanted to know, why are you doing what you are doing? What is the root? What is the engine?
So the source material today is his sermon, The Greatest Performances or Sufferings in Vain Without Love. And I have to tell you, reading this, it felt like Edwards was taking a sledgehammer to my entire religious resume.
It is a demolition project for sure. He strips away every defense mechanism we have.
He really does.
And he adheres strictly to the Reformed view, consistent with the Westminster Confession, that works, no matter how shiny, are dead without the specific regenerating grace of God.
Okay, let's get the text in front of us, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 3. Though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profits me nothing.
It profits me nothing. That is the hammer blow at the end of the sentence. It just
And
lands.
it really is. And our mission today is to figure out why. Why are these external actions, which look so holy to us, considered vanity without the specific motive of sincere Christian love?
Right.
We need to figure out the difference between what Edwards calls slavish duty and filial obedience.
And that distinction, slavish versus filial, that is going to be the key that unlocks this whole discussion.
How so?
Well, one is the obedience of a slave who fears the whip. The other is the obedience of a child who loves the father. They might be doing the exact same task, but the internal reality is worlds apart.
And God, Edwards argues, only cares about that internal reality.
That's it.
So let's get into section 1. Edwards calls this the insufficiency of great performances. And he starts with the first half of that verse, bestowing all goods to feed the poor. I want to pause on the scope of this. We're not talking about dropping a 20 in the offering plate or setting up a recurring donation on a credit card.
No, we are not. Edwards is very careful to define the magnitude here.
What does he say?
Well, the Greek phrasing implies a distributive act to dole out all my goods bit by bit until they are completely gone. It's the liquidation of 100% of your assets.
100%. This is a radical concept.
It is. And Edwards points to the historical context to show this isn't just hyperbole.
Like what?
He points to the primitive church in Acts 4.32. Remember, in those early days, believers were selling lands and houses and laying the proceeds at the apostles' feet.
So people were actually doing this.
They were. It was a communal survival strategy in a time of persecution, but it was also this massive act of faith.
He also mentions a specific famine, right?
Yes, the famine in Judea. The Corinthian church, the very people Paul was writing to, was being asked to contribute to the relief of the saints in Jerusalem.
So this was on their
It
minds.
was very practical for them. So when Paul says, though I bestow all my goods, he's not using a hypothetical that's impossible. He's describing a very real, very high bar of sacrifice that these people might actually be called to make.
And the extreme necessities of persecuted Christians.
Right. If you were a Christian in the 1st or 2nd century, losing your property was a very real risk. Confiscation by the state was common.
So you might lose it anyway.
Exactly. So voluntarily giving it away before they took it was a plausible scenario.
And yet, Edwards says you can do that. You can liquidate your portfolio, sell your house, give it all to the hungry, and have it count for nothing.
For nothing.
That seems counterintuitive. I have to push back here a bit. If I sell my house and feed 1,000 starving people, you're telling me God looks at that and says 0 value. That sounds incredibly harsh.
I get that.
I mean, the poor people got fed, didn't they? A good thing happened.
The poor were fed, yes.
Yeah.
Their stomachs are full. In a horizontal sense, human-to-human good was done. There's no denying that. But Edwards is talking about the vertical dimension. He's talking about the profit to the giver's soul. And in that transaction between the giver and God, it's possible for it to be worth nothing.
Because of motive.
Because of motive. This is where we run into the problem. Edwards distinguishes between the moral nature of an act and the spiritual gift of love. He points out that you can perform the act without the heart.
So the action is a shell.
A hollow shell.
Yeah.
You can paint the shell to look like a diamond, but if it's hollow, and God sees right through the paint.
He gives some examples of this performance without love. The first one he hits is the Pharisees.
Yes. He immediately goes to Philippians 3. This is where the Apostle Paul lists his own resume before he was converted.
His spiritual CV.
His CV, yeah.
Yeah.
Paul says he had confidence in the flesh. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees, blameless according to the law.
I always find that list in Philippians fascinating because Paul isn't saying I was a bad guy. He's saying I was the best guy.
Correct. He was the valedictorian of Judaism. He fasted. He ties mint and cumin down to the spices in his cabinet. He was scrupulous.
So he was doing all the great performances.
All of them. And Edwards also points to the Pharisee in Luke 18, the one who goes to the temple and prays, God, I thank you that I am not like other men.
Oh, that guy. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get.
Precisely. He had the performance down pat. But Edwards notes that his motivation was pride. He was doing it to establish his own righteousness, to be seen by men.
Right.
He was using God as a mirror to admire his own reflection. His giving wasn't for God. It was for himself.
Edwards also mentions the heathen. This is interesting to me. He acknowledges that people who do not believe in God at all can still be famous for integrity and justice.
That is a crucial observation. We call this common grace in Reformed theology, though Edwards here frames it as natural principles.
Explain that.
You look at figures in antiquity Greek philosophers, Roman senators, men famous for their justice or their service to the public good. They did not have the Holy Spirit. They did not have the love of Christ.
But they did good things.
They performed great acts of generosity and self-sacrifice. So if a Stoic philosopher can live a life of virtue, then virtue itself can't be the thing that saves you.
So if a Roman pagan can be generous, then generosity itself isn't proof of salvation.
That is the logic. Edwards argues that natural principles are strong enough to replicate almost any religious duty.
What does he mean by natural principles?
Things like conscience, a desire for a good reputation, fear of punishment, even just a natural sympathy for other people. You don't need the Holy Spirit to be a good citizen. You just need a conscience or pride or fear.
Let's unpack those alternative motives. You mentioned pride, but Edwards also talks heavily about the fear of hell.
This is a big one, and it probably hits closer to home for many religious people.
I would think so.
Edwards says many have done great things simply to appease a deity or make atonement for their sins. They view God as a transaction. If I give this money, God won't punish me. Or if I build this cathedral, I can pay off my guilt.
It's like paying protection money to the mob.
That's an apt analogy. It's a bribe. You're trying to buy God off. And Edwards says that is not love, that is self-preservation. Think about it. If you pay a kidnapper a ransom to not hurt you, do you love the kidnapper?
No, you fear him. You just want to survive.
Right. And Edwards argues that a huge amount of religious activity, giving, serving, attending, is just ransom money.
Yes.
It's people trying to buy their way out of God's anger.
And that's a fundamental misunderstanding of justification.
A complete misunderstanding. In the Reformed view, we are justified by faith alone, through grace alone. If you're doing good works to buy your way out of hell, you're not acting in love. You're acting out of a slavish fear.
That really reframes the generous donor concept. You could be giving millions, but if the motive is, I hope this covers my sins, it's actually an insult to the cross.
It is. It's saying the blood of Christ wasn't enough, so I need to top it off with my cash. It's a deeply prideful act, even though it looks humble.
The other side of that coin is pride, which we touched on. The desire for reputation.
The desire to be honored by men? Edwards points out that pride is a wildly powerful engine. It can make people do incredibly difficult things.
Sure.
Men will starve themselves, work themselves to death, or give away fortunes just to be admired, to have their name on a building. Edwards says if that is your engine, the car might move, but it is not going to heaven.
So, natural principles, fear, pride, desire for reputation, can drive a person to perform almost any religious duty.
Almost any.
They can mimic true grace without possessing it. That is a sobering thought. You can look like a super Christian on the outside and be running entirely on the fuel of self-love.
And that brings us to the second section, where Edwards escalates the cost. It's one thing to give away your stuff. It's another thing to give away your life.
Right. Section 2, the insufficiency of great sufferings. The verse says, though I give my body to be burned.
Edwards follows the logic of the verse perfectly. When a man has given away all his goods, what does he have left?
Nothing but himself.
He has himself, his physical body. So the ultimate offering is to take that body and subject it to torture or death for the sake of religion.
And again, historically, this was not a metaphor for the early church.
No. Paul was writing to people who knew martyrs. They had seen it. Edwards mentions that the primitive church was under persecution. People were being used as human torches in Nero's gardens.
It's an unimaginable horror.
It is. But Edwards argues that even this, even letting your body be consumed by flames, can be done in vain.
How? I mean, that's the one that's hardest for me to grasp. Who would let themselves be burned to death if they didn't really love God?
Right.
That seems like a level of commitment that you just can't fake. I can fake writing a check. I can't fake burning.
You would think so. But Edwards points to history to show that people suffer for all sorts of reasons that are not Christian love.
Okay, like what?
He starts with asceticism. Think of the hermits who spent their lives in deserts. The desert fathers.
The guys living on top of pillars for 40 years. Stylites.
Right. Or wearing hair shirts that scratch their skin raw, beating themselves with whips, walking barefoot on hot stones.
A lot of self-inflicted pain.
A lot. And Edwards asks, why were they doing that? In many cases, it was a voluntary penance. It was another form of payment. They thought that by making themselves miserable, they were earning merit with God.
It goes back to that transactional view. If I hurt myself enough, God will owe me.
Precisely. It's suffering as currency. It's still all about the self. It's trying to make yourself righteous through your own efforts, through your own pain.
Then he brings up a very specific historical example that I found fascinating. The Crusades.
Yes, he explicitly mentions the papists in the Holy Wars. Now, we need to remember, Edwards is a Puritan, a staunch Protestant, so his view of the Crusades is colored by that theology.
He's not exactly an unbiased observer.
He's not a fan, to put it mildly, but his point is theological. He points out that thousands of men went to war, risking their lives, bleeding and dying in foreign lands. Why? Was it out of pure love for Christ?
He argues no.
For many, he argues, it was because the Pope promised that participation in the crusade would secure the pardon of sins.
Plenary indulgence.
Right. The promise was, if you die in this holy war, you skip purgatory and go straight to heaven. So again, the soldier rushing into battle isn't necessarily driven by love for God. He's driven by a desire for a reward.
It's self-interest.
It's eternal self-interest.
Yeah.
He's buying his ticket to paradise with his blood, which, again, undermines the sufficiency of Christ's blood.
Edwards also mentions the Turks, the Muslims of his day.
He does. He mentions that they were willing to rush onto the very points of swords because they believed their prophet promised paradise to those dying in war.
So he's drawing a parallel. He's saying, look, if a Muslim soldier can die for his faith without Christian love, and a crusader can die for his faith just to get an indulgence, then the act of dying itself proves nothing about your relationship with the true God.
That is the argument. Death is not a validator of truth. It is a validator of conviction, certainly. But you can be convinced of a lie. You can be stubborn.
He uses that word obstinacy.
He does. And sturdiness of spirit, that phrase stood out to me.
I too.
Some people are just incredibly stubborn. They would rather die than admit they are wrong. They would rather burn than yield to their enemy. That is not love for God. That is just a rigid human will. It is pride wrapped in a martyr's robe.
So the verdict Edwards lands on is pretty harsh. Even if your body is mangled, burned, or tormented, if the motive isn't sincere love, the suffering provides no profit to the soul. You basically suffer twice, once in the flames on earth, and then again in the judgment.
It is a tragedy, a double tragedy. You lose the world and you lose your soul. It's the worst possible outcome.
Okay, so we've established that neither extreme generosity nor extreme suffering proves anything on its own. Now we need to get to the why.
The logic behind it.
This is section 3, the theological logic. Edwards doesn't just say God says so. He breaks down the mechanics of why this is true.
And this is where we really see the Reformed philosophical mind at work. His first reason is that external acts are lifeless. He uses a machine analogy.
This was a great image. I want to spend some time here because it feels very modern, even though he wrote it in the 1700s. He compares a person without a heart of love to a lifeless engine.
Think about a clockwork automaton. In Edwards' day, they were fascinated by these complex machines, little figures made of gears and springs that could write a letter or play a flute.
Like the ones you see in museums. Very intricate.
Very. And Edwards says, imagine you build a machine that can physically execute the motions of a good deed. It has springs and weights that force its arm to extend and drop a coin into a beggar's cup.
Okay.
Now let me ask you, is that machine generous?
No, of course not. It's just mechanics. It's physics. There's no I in there deciding to be kind.
Precisely. Edwards argues that if a human being performs a religious duty, say, going to church or giving money, but their heart is disconnected from it, they're no different than that machine.
Oh, so they're just going through the motions.
They're being moved by natural principles. Fear, habit, social pressure, just as the machine is moved by weights and springs.
So from the outside, the machine Christian and the real Christian look identical. The arm moves, the coin drops.
The physics are identical. The result for the beggar is identical. But Edwards says God doesn't look at the physics. God looks at the will.
The inner person.
He looks at the inward part. He argues that external motion has no moral value in itself. A rock falling on a villain isn't brave, and a machine feeding the poor isn't kind. The moral quality exists entirely in the intent of the agent.
That is a heavy concept. It implies that God is entirely unimpressed by our output. We are obsessed with output numbers, impact, results. God is obsessed with the engine.
That's the point. And this leads directly to his second point, which I think challenges a lot of modern Christian thinking. It's about God's self-sufficiency.
Right. The practical question someone might ask is, well, doesn't God want the money for the poor? Doesn't he want the job done?
And Edwards answers with the resounding, no, God does not need the money.
He doesn't need our help.
He quotes Psalm 50.10. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. He says if God were hungry, he wouldn't tell us.
That is a blow to our ego. We like to feel needed. We like to feel like we are helping God out, like we are partners in his business.
It is a blow. But the Reformed view of God is that he has aseity. He is self-existent and self-sufficient. He needs nothing from his creatures.
So why does he want our gifts at all?
Edwards explains that humans value gifts because we have needs. If I am starving and you give me a sandwich, I value that sandwich regardless of whether you like me or not, because I need the calories.
Right. You just want the food. The motive is secondary at that moment.
But God has no needs. He is full. Therefore, the value of a gift to him cannot be in the utility of the gift. It's entirely in the affection of the giver.
Say that again. That's really key.
Since the thing given adds nothing to God, the only thing he cares about is the love behind it.
That really changes how you look at the offering plate. God doesn't need the $20. He wants the heart that wants to give the $20.
Correct. The $20 is just the vehicle for the affection. Without the affection, it's just paper. It's nothing.
And that leads to his third reason, the nature of giving. Edwards defines what a gift actually is.
Yeah, this part is very philosophical, but it's brilliant.
He says a gift is giving to the object that is the great end or the ultimate goal of the giver. Okay, walk us through that.
It's teleological. It's all about ends and goals. Edwards argues that every action has a goal, a final purpose.
Okay.
So if I give money to a charity, but my ultimate goal, my great end, is to get my name in the paper,
Yeah.
or to feel good about myself, or to quiet my conscience,
Then what?
that Edwards argues I haven't actually given the money to the charity or to God. I have given it to myself.
So the recipient was just a pass-through? The real destination of the gift was my own ego?
Precisely. You use the poor as a tool to purchase reputation for yourself. If the end is self-honor, the gift is given to self. God was just instrumental to your real goal.
Oh.
He uses a musical instrument comparison here, too. Harps and cymbals make pleasant sounds, but they don't give praise to God because they have no will, no love.
They're just objects making noise.
And a human without love is no better than a loud cymbal, which is exactly the metaphor Paul uses in 1 Corinthians 13.1. I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal.
It all connects. Reason number 4 is a bit more legal. the sum of the law.
This is the argument that you cannot pay a debt by offering the wrong currency.
Explain.
The law, at its heart, is about relationship. Love is the fulfilling of the law. That is what God demands. The sum of the commandments is love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself.
So that's the currency, love.
Love is the currency of the covenant. So if you owe a debt of love, you can't pay it with rituals.
Right.
Imagine you owe the bank $1 million.
Yeah.
You walk into the bank and instead of giving the money, you start doing jumping jacks in the lobby.
I'm working hard. Look at me sweat. This is really difficult.
You're working very hard. You might even collapse from exhaustion. But the bank manager is going to look at you and say, that doesn't settle the debt.
Right. It's the wrong category of payment.
The debt is financial. Physical exertion doesn't pay it. In the same way, the debt we owe God is love. Rituals, pilgrimages, fasting, those are just spiritual jumping jacks. If they aren't backed by the currency of love, they don't pay the debt.
And his fifth reason is the most biting one: hypocrisy and idolatry.
He calls it practical lying, which is such a great phrase.
It is.
If you act outwardly religious, singing the songs, bowing your head, giving the money, but you don't love God internally, you are lying to the Holy One. Psalm 78.36 says they lied unto him with their tongues.
You're putting on a show for an audience of one who can see backstage.
The worst possible audience to try and fool.
Yeah.
And he compares it to idolatry.
How does he make that connection?
Because if you are not doing it for God, you are doing it for something else, usually yourself or the world or your reputation. That something else is an idol.
So you're just sacrificing to a different god?
You are sacrificing your goods or your body to the idol of self while pretending to offer it to Jehovah. It's the ultimate bait and switch.
He uses a marriage analogy there, doesn't he?
He does. And this is where the relational aspect really shines. He says a wife cannot make up for unfaithfulness by doing extra chores.
Oh, that's powerful.
Imagine a wife who is sleeping with another man, but she comes home and says to her husband, well, I know I'm cheating on you, but look, I washed the dishes and swept the floor really well today. I even cooked your favorite meal.
That puts it in perspective. The chores don't matter if the covenant love is broken. In fact, the chores are almost insulting at that point.
They're offensive. She is trying to use the chores to distract from the betrayal, to manage the relationship instead of repenting.
It's damage control.
Edwards says that is what we do when we offer God works without love. We are spiritual adulterers trying to smooth things over with a clean house. God wants the marriage, not just the housekeeping.
So we have stripped away the performances. We have stripped away the sufferings. We have seen the logic of why they are empty. Now we need to figure out, what is the real thing?
What does the real thing look like?
Section 4 is, what is sincerity?
Edwards pivots here to self-examination. After tearing everything down, he starts to build back up. He contrasts the wealth of a kingdom given without love against a cup of cold water given with love.
And God's reaction is the opposite of what we'd expect.
Completely. God accepts the cup of water. He rejects the kingdom.
That is the hope in this message. It's not about volume. It's about quality. It's not about how much, but with what heart.
Yes. And so he breaks down 4 marks of sincerity, a diagnostic tool for the soul.
Let's go through them, because I think you listening need a diagnostic tool here. The first one is truth.
Truth. This connects back to the hypocrisy point. Edwards says the outside must match the inside. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, from Psalm 51.
It sounds like authenticity.
It is. To be sincere means to be without guile. It means you are the same person in the prayer closet as you are on the public stage.
No acting, no masks.
No masks. If you show respect to God outwardly, you must feel it inwardly. It is an alignment of the soul and the body. You are not trying to project an image that you know is false.
The second mark is freedom. This one feels very central to the Reformed understanding of the will.
It is. This is where he brings back that distinction between filial obedience and slavish obedience.
Filial meaning of a son or daughter.
And slavish meaning of a slave.
I feel like a lot of people, maybe most people, operate in that slavish mode. I have to do this or God will zap me.
That is the default human mode. A slave obeys because he is forced to. He fears the whip. He hates the work. He resents the master, but he does it to avoid punishment.
So his body is present, but his heart is absent.
That is the person who obeys God only out of fear of hell or a guilty conscience. But a child, a true son, obeys because he loves the Father. He delights in the Father.
Edwards says sincere love chooses God for his own sake.
Yes. for who he is, not just for what he gives or what punishments he withholds. The sincere Christian finds delight in the duty itself.
How so?
They don't just pray to get things. They pray because they love being with God. They don't just give to check a box. They give because they love what God loves. It's a free, willing obedience.
It's the difference between kissing your spouse because it's your anniversary and you feel you have to.
And kissing them because you walk into the room, see them, and are just overwhelmed with affection, and you can't help yourself. One is duty, the other is delight.
The third mark is integrity.
Integrity comes from the root word for integer, or whole. It means wholeness.
What does that look like in practice?
Edwards says you can't pick and choose duties. You can't say, well, I'll be generous with my money, but I'm going to keep harboring this grudge against my neighbor. Or, I'm great at attending church, but my business practices are shady.
The whole heart is involved.
Right. Sanctification affects the whole man, body, soul, spirit. If you are only religious in certain areas of your life, but you fence off other areas for fin, that is a lack of integrity. Sincerity demands the whole person. You can't be a saint on Sunday and a crook on Monday.
And the fourth mark is purity.
Purity means unmixed motives. He quotes 1 Peter 2.2, the sincere milk of the word. That word sincere there implies something unadulterated.
Like pure milk, no water added.
No water added, no poison added. The motive isn't 80% love for God and 20% love for reputation. It's pure.
So it's opposition to sin.
It is. It's a hatred of defilement. It's not just doing the right thing, but hating the wrong thing. It's a clean heart, not just clean hands.
It's a different kind of question you ask yourself.
Exactly. The question changes from, can I get away with this, to, does this offend God whom I love?
So truth, freedom, integrity, purity, those are the metrics. If we look at those honestly, I think most of us start to get a little nervous. I look at that list and I see a lot of gaps in my own life, a lot of mixture in my motives.
We should feel nervous. That is the intended effect of the law, to show us our insufficiency, to crush our self-righteousness.
Which brings us to Section 5, Application and Reformed Analysis. Edwards addresses two groups of people. First, he speaks to the unregenerate, those who have not been born again.
And this is where the deep dive into Edwards requires us to face the doctrine of total depravity.
Meaning what in this context?
Meaning that in our natural state, we are unable to produce this kind of sincere love. Our hearts are turned inward. We are the machines.
So Edwards warns that for those outside of Christ, the reality is frightening. You cannot make up for a lack of love by working harder.
You can't.
That is the natural human instinct, isn't it? I feel distant from God, so I'll volunteer more. I'll read 5 chapters instead of 1. I'll fix this.
It is the religious treadmill. You just run faster and faster, but you're not going anywhere. But Edwards says a person can pray, fast, and suffer, yet remain a wretched, lost, miserable creature if the heart is not renewed.
He says building hopes on works is feeding upon the east wind.
Such a vivid image.
Feeding on the wind. You're chewing, but you're starving. All this effort, and you're getting no nourishment, no profit.
It's empty calories. Actually, it is 0 calories. It's depleting you.
So the call here isn't to try harder to love God.
No.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I need to go conjure up some sincere, free, pure love for God, you have missed the point entirely.
Why?
You can't conjure it.
Right.
A machine cannot decide to become a real boy. A stone cannot decide to bleed. It's a change of nature that's required.
And this connects to the necessity of grace.
It does. Since we cannot manufacture this love naturally, because our hearts are naturally curved inward on ourselves, we are dependent on regenerating grace. We need a heart transplant. We need God to do what we cannot do.
That is the Reformed distinctiveness. We don't love God so that he will choose us. He chooses us and gives us the heart to love him.
Exactly. We are undone until God intervenes. The application for the unbeliever is to stop trusting in their resume. Stop waving your charity receipts at God. Stop pointing to your suffering.
What should they do instead?
Fall in the mercy of Christ to change your nature. The prayer isn't, God, accept my works. It's, God, give me a new heart that can actually love you.
Edwards then paints a picture of Judgment Day. He talks about the King of Terrors.
That is his name for death. He says when the King of Terrors arrives, and when you see Christ in the clouds, the vanity of all those empty works will be revealed.
They'll just burn up.
They'll be like ash. You won't be able to hold up your charitable donations as a shield against the judgment of God. The only safety is resting on Christ, not on the great things we have done.
And finally, he exhorts the believers. What is the takeaway for the Christian who is sincere but struggling? Because I think that is where many of us live. We have the love, but it feels weak, it feels mixed.
The exhortation is to seek this love, to prize it above everything else. Do not rest in the external evidences, the doings and sufferings, but look at the spirit behind them.
So it's a constant recalibration of the heart.
A constant diagnostic. Why am I doing this? Is it for him? Is it out of love? Or has fear or pride crept back in?
It's a call to intimacy, really.
It is. Without this, religious activity, Edwards warns, only tends to deepen condemnation.
How so?
It makes us harder. It makes us more hypocritical. It creates a callous on the soul. So we become comfortable with a disconnect between our actions and our hearts.
So the believer needs to constantly return to the source of love,
Which is Christ, and ask for that love to be rekindled, to ask for a purer heart. The struggle itself is a sign of life, but we shouldn't be content to stay in it.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground. We've gone from the liquidation of assets to the burning of bodies to the mechanics of the human heart.
It's a comprehensive dismantling of the idea that we can manipulate God with our actions. It's a tough message.
It is. So let's bring this home. The machine versus the child. That seems to be the core contrast.
That is the summary. You can be a machine that performs duties perfectly. You can click and whir and execute every command. You can be efficient. You can be useful.
You can look like a great Christian.
You can look like a perfect Christian. But God doesn't want a machine. He wants a child. He wants a relationship defined by freedom, delight, and sincere affection, not by gears and springs.
And that leads me to this final thought for us to chew on. We've seen that God doesn't need our help.
Not at all.
He doesn't need our money. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He doesn't even need us to suffer for him, strictly speaking. So if he doesn't need our utility, what is left?
Only us.
Only us. The only thing we actually bring to the table is the one thing we most often withhold, our honest affection. It makes me wonder, are we busy for God to avoid being intimate with God? It is much easier to work for him than to love him.
That is the question of the ages. And Edwards would say the work is only valuable if it flows from the love. Otherwise, it profits us nothing.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Jonathan Edwards. It has been a challenging one, but a necessary one.
Indeed. A very necessary one.
Thanks for listening to Reformed Thinking. We will see you next time.